talk about grip. When we get into a semi-auto, we know that most of us run a thumbs forward position right here. This works really good, getting a good high tang grip on the back strap of the gun. Very, very important. There's more to the grip than what I'm basically covering right now. We just know that we take both hands, put it on the left-hand side of the gun, and drive the gun out in front of us. And this is generally a pretty modern grip. However, with the revolver, that's going to change.
Talk about proper grip on the revolver. Some similarities to the semi-automatic. You still want to be high up on the back strap of the gun. When my hand comes up, gets up on the back of the revolver here, don't want to be too high because I don't want to impede the hammer stroke, but right in here so that the gun has a good place to live at. With the support hand, I want to come in, knuckles meet knuckles, and as I change sides, you can see thumbs lock over thumbs. For my hand size, this is what works best for me. There are some variations to this. What I don't really want to do is slide into the modern semi-automatic grip. I love it for shooting semi-autos. It does not have a real place in the revolver world because if I get my thumb out in front of the other thumb, you can see it wants to ride up against the cylinder. And what happens when I try and squeeze the trigger on this and the cylinder has to rotate, I'm now impeding the function. I'm getting a very heavy trigger pull, a jerky trigger pull, not good at all. Next thing is, well, let's just move it down and out of the way, and oh, then we can get it farther forward on the gun. Yes, in theory, that's a great idea. However, in practice, it's a really, really bad idea. All revolvers have a barrel cylinder gap to them, and this is where high-pressure gas exits when you fire the cartridge. If you look at the face of this cylinder, you can see the burn marks where that gas comes out from between the cylinder and the back of the barrel. It comes out on a 357 at very high pressure. You can imagine the pressure that it comes out at on something like a 460 Smith & Wesson. You can actually lose your thumb, or at least a good portion of it, if it gets too close to that barrel cylinder gap. Not a good idea. Well, let's talk about double action trigger control and trigger finger placement on the trigger to attain that. What I want to do is use the first crease of my trigger finger on the trigger. I don't want to use the tip like I would for a 1911, or depending on how you shoot a striker fire gun, some people shoot it off the center of the fingerprint on their finger. And yes, you can pull the trigger that way, but I do not have the leverage that I need to actually control the trigger like I want to. So I slide into what some people refer to as the power crease on the finger, and I use that to control the double action trigger. And what I'm looking for is a nice, smooth roll of the trigger to the rear. And what you can see is my thumb and my finger are almost meeting here. So one of the advantages that I have for that is I can feel this if I need to stage the hammer for a precision shot. Say I need to take that ocular box shot close distance, but it's a precision shot. I can stage the double action trigger, and then it's just a nice smooth short press to the rear to get the round downrange with good accuracy, rather than having to just roll through the gun really hard like that. If I'm shooting center of mass, that's fine. Rolling through the trigger consistently, not a problem. Precision shot, I want to stage that hammer and then send the round down range. So a lot of you might be wondering at this point why this is called a double action revolver. We've only shown you one method of firing it, and that is putting a finger on the trigger, pressing it to the rear, and that is double action. What it does is it rotates the cylinder and it cocks the hammer and then releases it to fire it. There is another method that you can use to fire a double action revolver, and that is to thumb cock the hammer. That rotates the cylinder and it puts the hammer back, and it creates a much lighter trigger pull for you now. It has limited utility in the law enforcement, defense, tactical world. Most of our shots are made double action, and you saw good double action control. You can get really good accuracy out to a pretty fair distance with properly run double action trigger control. However, there are times that single action is useful to you. In the rural area that I worked in, there is always a potential for getting caught in that handgun versus rifle fight. Not something you ever want to be in, but I might need that extra advantage to be able to send a super accurate round downrange with a nice light trigger pull. The other thing that I use it for a tremendous amount is when I'm zeroing my revolver and I'm shooting off the bench from sandbags to establish my initial zero, or maybe I'm testing a new defensive round and I want to see how well it really shoots, then I will shoot it from the bench in single action. There's a couple ways that you can address the trigger in single action. You can shoot it from the power crease, just like I did with the double action. And you see that I've almost got a built-in trigger stop here with my grip. So I'm going to squeeze the trigger and the gun hardly moves. My finger came back and it stopped. You can also thumb cock it and you can now shoot it off of the center of your fingerprint like we talked about before for some of the semi-auto guns. This is an acceptable method to shoot the revolver in single action. It works really well. What happens if I've thumb cocked the revolver and now I need to put the hammer back forward, but I don't want to fire the revolver? A couple ways that you can do that. One of them is to come in with your non-firing hand thumb and block the hammer, squeeze the trigger, take the tension off of the sear, and then ease that hammer forward. And by releasing the trigger at the same time, it resets the internal safety mechanisms on a Ruger or a Smith or a Colt. They have some passive mechanisms in there that if the trigger's not all the way to the rear, they should not fire. There's always that chance that they could, so the muzzle needs to be in safe direction. The other thing that you can do if you have a thumb-cocked revolver and you need to put the hammer back forward is use the pinch method. I'm going to come in with my thumb and forefinger, I'm going to pinch the hammer, I'm going to squeeze the trigger, I'm going to let back off the trigger, and I'm going to let it go forward, and you can see the trigger reset there, so it'll allow my internal safeties to reset and allow me to put the hammer forward in a safe manner.